Hey folks, James Abrinio coming to you from Abrinio Law. Wanted to talk to you real quick about some pretty concerning reporting coming from the New York Times and specifically their podcast, The Daily. If you're not a listener, highly encourage it. Great content there, very useful. But just as you can see, 3 days ago, they published an issue called Every 8 Minutes Uber's Alarming Sexual Violence Problem. And in it, and in that article, and I'll post a link to it in the show notes, they talk about previously unknown or unclear levels of sexual violence issues for Uber consumers and even Uber drivers. Previously, I was aware, and the public was probably aware, that there are many allegations of sexual assault and other sexual misconduct that happens during Uber rides. But according to this reporting, for the time period of 2017 to 2022, there was in excess of 400,000 complaints of either sexual assault or other sexual misconduct. Now, it was previously known that there were many claims of sexual assault against Uber. There had been some reporting on it that I've seen, and as a litigator, I'm also just aware in my course of practice that unfortunately sexual assaults occur in Ubers. But what this report clarified is essentially Uber was underreporting or undercounting these incidents because they essentially gave a grade of level of sexual misconduct from serious sexual offenses and sexual allegations of sexual assault down to less serious claims like harassment and things like that. And so essentially they were underreporting the sexual misconduct that was alleged to have happened during their rides by really focusing on only the most serious of allegations. Now, you can listen to the podcast itself and it'll get into more details about what they were doing. But I think it's fair to say, and it's pretty straightforward, that they were not transparent about what was going on in their rides. Also, what was truly concerning, and when you listen to the podcast, is apparently they also did their own internal investigations because they were very concerned about this, which they should have been. But it turns out that they were more concerned from a business standpoint than I think from a human standpoint. They actually had information that would allow them, based on the data, to give a better sense of when sexual assaults were more likely to happen, and from the types of pairings between riders and drivers where it was more likely to happen, which you probably won't be surprised. I think that their data showed more likely to be on the weekend evenings and more likely between a woman being sexually assaulted or sexually harassed by a man. So that reporting was essentially not really acted upon by them. But also, they had specific recommendations in their own analysis about how to minimize the risks of sexual assault or sexual harassment. And one specific recommendation was to mandate that drivers have cameras in their car capturing the ride and capturing what's happening. And this makes a lot of sense. And just to back up a little bit, one of the surprising results from the reporting was it wasn't just passengers that were being victims of sexual assault and or sexual harassment, but drivers as well. So drivers being harassed or assaulted by their passengers. But again, getting back to, they had a specific recommendation considered about having mandated cameras in the vehicles to make sure that what was happening was being monitored. And it makes sense. If you're a passenger considering sexually assaulting or harassing your driver, but you know that it's being recorded, you're hopefully less likely to do that. Now, criminals sometimes do pretty stupid things, but hopefully knowing that that's their requirements, you're less likely to do it. If you're a driver that may be desiring to sexually assault or harass a passenger, knowing that you're going to have a camera on, that it's going to be monitored, you're hopefully less likely to do that. But the company chose ultimately not to require or mandate these cameras. And for the sole reason is their business model, they were aware, demanded and relied on the drivers being considered under the law as independent contractors rather than employees. Well, James, what's the difference? Why does it matter? What matters for various reasons, but two primary reasons. Number one, when you're thinking about from the business side, if you have an employee, you have more obligations to that employee as the employer. There's tax requirements, more pay requirements, insurance requirements, and it just makes it a more complicated relationship. But also from a civil liability standard, if you have an employee, you're more likely to be held responsible for their acts, both criminal and negligent. And I can tell you that is an actively litigated thing against Uber and other rideshare drivers about whether or not their drivers are indeed employees versus independent contractors. And in analyzing this, the court actually walks through various variables in determining, because it's not a clear answer about whether or not a driver is considered an employee versus independent contractor. And this happens in other employee-employer relationships as well, where the employers are trying to deny liability, both civil and business-wise, based upon the person allegedly being an independent contractor. Various variables include what kind of pay, is it salary? What kind of payment methods are there? Requirements of the employee to do certain things. Here, for instance, I would argue if you're an Uber driver, you're required to pick somebody up at a specific time and take them to a specific location. You're limited on what your can charge because the app sets that for you. I would argue that all counts towards that person being an employee. They would argue it counts as an independent contractor. But certainly, if the employer is mandating cameras be in the car to monitor the behavior, that is a strong argument in favor of that driver being an employee. And the company here, according to this reporting, decided that we're not going to mandate it because we don't want them to be considered an independent contractor. So let's take a step back and think about what that means. You have a company that is putting their customers and their drivers at more potential risk because they're worried about their business model. So all I hear about as a plaintiff's attorney is the need for tort reform, ambulance chasers, that we get called, all those kinds of things. The insurance lobby and the business lobby has done a great job of training the public about how business is good, capitalism is good, and that there's only actors that are going to, the market is going to protect everybody. But the reality is, you see businesses like this time and time again making these kinds of decisions to protect the business and not to protect the consumer or here their own workers. So I want to thank the New York Times for taking the time to actually doing this digging and doing this reporting. Without reporters, valuable reports like this, these companies would be getting away with it. Hopefully, the fact that the public knows now, at least from a market standpoint, they know they're going to have to make a change. I can tell you as a lawyer, I will be looking closer at these cases. And so I'm just glad that the reporters are there, able to do their job. Again, I will link the link to the podcast in the show notes here. If you feel like it's interesting, feel free to comment, ask questions, feel free to reach out. You can always reach out to us at Breeding Law. Again, super important reporting. Thanks again to the New York Times. Wish you guys the best. Reach out with any questions. Thanks.